The 1637 incident was ruled a military necessity, but the evidence told a very different story. May 26, 1637. You stand on a low bank of the Mystic River in what is now Groton, Connecticut. The sun climbs, smoke rises. Inside a palisaded Pequot fort, children cling to their mothers. Outside, English muskets glint. Captain John Mason and Captain John Underhill confer with Mohegan sachem Uncas and Narragansett leaders. There are no negotiations left. There is only the plan to burn the village and kill any who flee. Europeans had been in New England for barely 2 decades. Jamestown was a failed experiment that had survived by brutality and luck. Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay were new and hungry for land. The Pequot were a powerful maritime people who controlled trade along the Thames and Mystic Rivers. Tensions exploded after the July 1645 murder of trader John Oldham, an incident colonial records blamed on Pequot raiders, and a string of raids and reprisals between 1636 and 1637 pushed both sides toward war. By spring 1637, the Connecticut settlements of Saybrook, Hartford, and New Haven had formed a militia with support from Massachusetts Bay. According to contemporary accounts by John Underhill and John Mason, the assault force on Mystic was made up of roughly 90 English militiamen together with several hundred Mohegan and Narragansett warriors. On paper, it was a military strike. In practice, it became something else. They came at dawn. The Pequot fort was palisaded, a ring of cedar posts 3 or 4 feet apart. Wigwams were stacked inside the enclosure. When the attackers struck, they rode horses and fired muskets. The native allies rushed the palisade with hatchets. Mason ordered the fort set alight. Wigwams burned like beacons. Smoke choked the defenders. Survivors who fled were cut down. According to Underhill's News from America, the attackers killed between 400 and 600 Pequots that day. Mason later claimed 400. Women and children were not spared. Some evidence records men shot as they crawled from the flames. The carnage was immediate and total. Bodies piled near the river. Dogs came to scavenge. Some witnesses later testified that the smoke was so thick that rescuers could not approach. The English rifles and the native allies' hatchets turned the village into an inferno. There was a cheer among the attackers. There were hymns sung that evening. The colonists wrote dispatches home calling it a glorious victory. But what investigators found next would change everything. Pequot survivors fled inland. Many were hunted down over the summer and autumn of 1637. Sassacus, the Pequot sachem, fled to the Mohawk. The Mohawk killed him and presented pieces of his body to colonial allies. Men, women, and children who remained were captured. According to colonial court records and later correspondence from Connecticut magistrates, hundreds of captives were sold into slavery in the West Indies and Bermuda. Others were distributed among allied tribes. The 1638 Treaty of Hartford formally outlawed the Pequot as a political entity. It forbade survivors from returning to their lands and, astonishingly, forbade the use of the Pequot name. There were no trials for the commanders. John Mason returned to Connecticut a man praised for executing a decisive blow to a looming threat. He published an account, a brief history of the Pequot War, defending the attack as necessary and righteous. Contemporary clerics and magistrates rationalized it as divine judgment. Voices of dissent were few and muted. In later centuries, some New Englanders would call it a massacre. Few in power at the time would answer for it. The massacre at Mystic did not end violence in New England. It remapped power. Uncas and the Mohegan expanded their influence with English backing. Colonial expansion accelerated into former Pequot lands. Human lives were erased from maps and treaties. Artifacts and bones turned up in field for centuries, evidence of a night that colonists turned into propaganda and survivors turned into commodities. The official verdict remained military necessity for generations. The maps were redrawn. The name Pequot vanished from the public record by decree. But the charred timber, the piles of charred bodies, the broken families sold abroad, and the treaty that outlawed a people's name are stubborn evidence. Centuries later, the site at Mystic is a quiet place with plaques and monuments. The words on those stones try to translate an atrocity into a date and an apology. The question that lingered at the river in 1637 sits there still. What law, what scripture, what conscience allows society to burn its neighbors and call it survival?